quarter two. I'm gonna start in about 2 minutes. Not going to go through any one paper fully, but I think we have 5. All right, guys. So again, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Sorry about the late start. Too long, I can promise that, right? So I'm going to share my screen right about now. Share my screen. Yeah. I'm going to share my screen now. Yeah, everybody see my screen? Everybody seen it? All right, cool, awesome. Yeah, all right. Yeah, go back to full screen. Full screen. Right. Right, so I guess you guys can go answer that poll there. So yeah. With regard to how I generally advise persons to study, or I guess I should probably start off with the introduction. So I'm Dalkeith Thomas. I did CSEC, well, I did CSEC quite a few years ago now, come to think of it, I cannot feeling old. But I think I did CSEC in like 2016. And yeah, I did CSEC Econ and Cape Econ as well. Right. And then I went to university and I did Econ and statistics in undergrad, and now I'm doing an Econ master's. But yeah, and I used to go to, well, I went to Wilmot, so I'm a Wilmot's old student, right, an old boy. But generally, with regard to studying for economics, and CSEC Economics, I would just, and CAPE as well, I would just tell you guys to, follow the syllabus, ensure that you know what's on the syllabus, the definitions that they ask you to know, or different things. And you can access the syllabus quite easily because it's free. You just type it in on Google, CSEC Economics syllabus, and it will come up quite immediately. And the PDF will can open it and look at the various things that you're really required to know and then study accordingly. You have to make use of the resources that are available to you. And Google is a pretty massive resource, especially now. So, yeah. So, like I said before, what we'll be doing today is we're going through different questions on different papers. I have a few papers here. I'll be having to pause my screen from time to time because some, for example, like they require a graph to be drawn, and I don't know the graph on Adobe Acrobat, so but the stuff, the content is relatively digesting, but I think that's although it may sound quite cliche, I think that probably you put your mind towards it and you work and pray and stuff, you will be fine. And again, if things don't go as you would expect or as you would desire for them to go, don't beat yourself up. Because life doesn't end at CSEC, trust me. Never does it end at CAPE. That's the beauty of life as well. There'll be more opportunities and stuff. And life is a great thing, So yeah, let's come and let us continue. So we have the last year's paper. We're gonna do a few questions from it. Typically, we know the way they start these papers is by asking you definitions, right? So, or ask you to list a few things. So for example, question 1 says, list 3 main agents in an economy. And we know that economy are, household, the firms, and the government. We know that the household, and then they ask you to state the role of each, right? So we know that the household, for example, they purchase goods and services from the firms. They also supply labor to the firms. We know that the firms purchase labor from the household and supply goods and services to the household. And we know that the government, yeah, I know it's paper 1 that you guys have first. And that's generally the case. That's been the case from when I was doing it. And the paper 1 marathon is, it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. But have to still, yeah. So yeah. So after that, now we have we stated each, right? The government is responsible for the overall running of the economy. So yeah, those are the rules for each of them. And it's an easy way to secure some marks, right? We'll go through a few more on this paper and then we can jump to another paper. So they asked us to explain how scarcity creates the economy. And I have a comment here. So economics itself is built around scarcity and choice. So we understand that resources are finite, right? They're not infinite, and thus you have to make a decision. And due to that scarcity, right? So for example, you have whereas mango season, but mangoes are not in infinite supply. You don't have infinity mangoes. So you don't, right? So you have to make a decision with regard to how many mangoes you can eat or you want to eat. You cannot eat infinity mangoes, right? Sorry about that noise in my background. There's a vehicle passing. Just give me a second while it passes. All right. Sorry about that. It's just, the noisy vehicles passing by to announce things. So, as the comment says here, due to this scarcity, individuals, which is like me and you, have to make a decision regarding what to produce, for whom to produce, and how to produce. I know that you guys know that those are the three major economic questions: what, how, and for. Now, we have this concept of opportunity cost and money cost. And money cost is literal cost that we see every day. So, for example, if you want to buy a cat, and the cat costs like $5,000, that would be money cost, right? But opportunity cost is what you forego, right? When you make a decision. So for example, being here, you guys would have foregone probably time that you could use to play some games or watching a Netflix series. I don't know if you guys watch Charlotte or that stuff, so you could do those type of things, right? So being here, that's actually what you give up. So you give up the opportunity to watch another episode of Queen Charlotte, or I don't know what other series you guys are watching nowadays, but yeah. So let us continue. Let us continue. All right, so I had this PPF. I had this PPF, right? I had this PPF. I actually have better drawn PPFs though, and you see them on other, and that is why we're doing a number of questions. You see them on other questions. You see them on other questions, right? That we go through. So I'll just tell you guys to wait until I reach those other questions. But I mean, a PPF graph looks, you have a curve, and you have the efficient, attainable, inefficient. Inefficient would be inside here, efficient would be on the line, and unattainable would be above the line. And we know the concept of opportunity cost, generally speaking, it's not always the case, but generally speaking, it has an increasing opportunity cost, which means that it looks more like, it looks like this, increasing opportunity costs. You also can have decreasing opportunity costs, which means that it would look like, sorry, this. Constant opportunity, which just means that it's going to be a line. But yeah, let us press on. But I jump from paper to paper to an extent. So let me check. Okay, so the second thing, we know we typically have to define some terms, right? And terms, for example. So first they have market. We know that a market is a situation in which buyers and sellers interact to exchange goods and services. Ensure that if you have your definition, you have goods and services and you have buyers and sellers. I think that will secure your 2 marks, which is easy 2 marks. Also have supply schedule. And the schedule, remember when we speak about the schedule, we're speaking about the table, right? We're speaking about a table. So the supply schedule is a table that lists the change in the number of goods offered for sale by suppliers at varying price levels. I think you probably will see an example of this as we go through, different sheets and stuff like that. But it's really just the table that shows price, quantity supplied, price, quantity supplied, price, quantity supplied, price, quantity supplied, right? So, furthermore, it says, state 2 factors that could cause an increase in the supply of pens. Now, there are a number of factors that can cause supply to increase, right? So if owner, right? If you're a business owner and if you're a business owner and your cost of production decreases, which means that it's cheaper for you to produce the same amount as you were before. So for example, let's say it would cost you 500,000 to produce 500 pens. Now it costs you 250,000 to produce 500 pens. Now you could produce more pens than you were before because your cost of production is low, right? If you had changes in technology, then that would also influence the way in which you produce pens. So for example, let's say that you had a device, some artificial intelligence or some device like that, and it can produce pens like instantly. So you don't even have to wait on a person to, make the different pen parts and stuff like that. You have robots that can do that for you. So that would also increase the supply of pens quite a bit. All right. So those are 2 factors. You have other factors as well. For example, if there's an increase in the number of persons, right, then the supply of pens would increase by default, right? Now, as the table here says, we have a demand and supply schedule, right? And a demand and supply, schedule for pens, right? So, and similar, if we remove the demand aspect, that would have been a supply schedule as the definition prior stated. Now, the first thing they asked us to do is calculate the price elasticity of supply. One of the examples in which I'm going to have to pause my share for a moment, and then I will open and show you guys, what I actually did. Just give me a moment, guys. It's not to open my sheet. Oh, yeah, I have to find it. There we go.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Dalkeith, good.
Yeah, man. I'm good.
Okay.
So let me reshare now. Hey man, let me reshare now. I'll pause it. So let me resume share. New share. Come to here. All right. So fortunately, it's sideways a bit, so you have to turn it a little bit, right? But remember that we have our pens, right? So the first thing that we're doing, we're going to use this elasticity of supply, percent change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price, right? So we know that we need to first find the percentage change in quantity supplied, right? So we're changing quantity supplied is the new quantity minus the old quantity, all divided by the old quantity multiplied by 100. Well, we tabulate that, we get 400%, quote unquote, right? For the change in price, it's a similar situation. The new price minus the old price over the old price times 100, right? And that's 4 minus 2 over 2 times 100. And then we'll tabulate that, we get with 100%. For our final price elasticity, we have percentage change in quantity supplied, all divided by percentage change in price. And that's 400 quote unquote percent or 100%. And we're going to get a price elasticity of supply of 4. Right? This up here is the prior thing, actually, in terms of they're asking us to draw a PPF. Right? So let us return to paper. So that is what that would look like. Now, for this question, I mean, for this question here, I didn't write this one out, but it's pretty intuitive in that on our y-axis, we would have, oh, can I annotate? Okay. On our y-axis, we would have our price. On our x-axis, rather, we would have our quantity, right? On our x-axis, we would have our quantity. So now I put that price on the x-axis would have our quantity, right? We'd end up having, our demand, right? And then we also have our supply, and then we know this would be our equilibrium, right? And our equilibrium would be where the quantity demanded and quantity of supply are equal, right? And our equilibrium in this case, what if I have one? That's unfortunate. We actually have an equilibrium because there's no point at which quantity demand and quantity supply are actually equal. But typically there is, right? Yeah, typically there is. So, it actually just asks for price and quantity supplied. So you would only actually have one. You'd only have this one up here, this one alone. And then you'd have the corresponding prices on this axis and the quantity supplied on the other axis. So that is some stuff from that paper. I think we'll come back to that paper in a bit as well, but trying to cover different bases or different grounds rather than just going through one paper and then going through another paper. And then I also have to try to keep you guys' attention because I know that even my own self, my attention will just go if I stay, on something school related for too long. So these we're going to do some aspects of 2021's paper. All right, we're going to do some aspects of 2021 newspaper as well. So let us press into it. Let's press into it. So similarly, our first questions typically asked to either define or to list, you know, some good marks that you guys can. And the first, what they asked us to do this time was to define the law of demand and the law of supply, right? So we know that the law of demand says that, you know, price and demand, or price and quantity demand rather, are inversely related. This means that when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. And think about it. If the price of something gets very, very expensive, then you will demand less of it. If bread costs 10 grand tomorrow, a lot less people would buy bread. The law of supply, on the other hand, says that there is a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. If you're a supplier and you supply bread and the price of bread goes up to $10,000 tomorrow, you're going to try to get as much bread out on the market as much as possible because you want to get as much profit as possible, right? Secondly, they asked us to identify two determinants of supply. And the two determinants of supply are technology and taxation and subsidies and number of producers. I don't know if you realize, but this is a very similar thing that they asked the year after. This is 2021. In 2022, they asked something very, very similar, right? In fact, the answers are basically the same in terms of what would cause quantities of supply to increase or to decrease. I don't remember, or to change, right? So we know that that is the case. We know that that is the case. So they also asked us to, they asked us to explain four determinants of demand. Now the explain questions are a bit longer, as you may realize, and it's 8 marks. So that means that each of these should basically warrant 2 marks, right? So what taste and fashion? So we know that taste and fashion affects demand. So for example, eating Lucky Charms or cornflakes in the morning, you have a desire for it, you know, you have a taste for it, you want it in the morning. In the night, probably not so much. So demand would probably fall in the night, would fall for that. Demand for that would fall in the night. Income as well. If you have a lot of money, then you'll demand more stuff, right? So if you like something like supplement, for example, if you have a lot of money, maybe you'd buy like 7 when you go to the supermarket, 1 for each day, right? However, if you don't have that much money, then maybe you can only purchase 1. So you demand less by default. Furthermore, you have number of buyers as well, right? A number of buyers in terms of if all of us here demand supplement, it's going to have a higher quantity demand than if I just wanted supplement, right? So that is another issue. And the price of other products also makes a difference. So in the case of soda, for example, if the price of Coca-Cola gets very, very high, then the demand of Pepsi would get very, very high because those are rivals, right? So the price gets very high, demand would also get very high, right? So yeah. So for number 2, they also asked us to define some terms. Now, for these, I mean, the definitions are there in a text, and the definitions are they're more digestible probably than the ones that you'd see online. So I found this one from the study guide actually. Capital refers to the real assets that are used in the production of goods and services. That is fine. And entrepreneurial talent as well. These definitions are there in you guys' textbooks, you know, and it's only 2 marks, so you don't really need to necessarily go hard. I think for 2 marks, you write 2 sentences. So
possibly you write the definition and you give like an example. That is what my teacher used to say to me. Right? So entrepreneur people prepare to take risks to achieve rewards, mainly in the form of profit, right? The two main, and then they also ask, just like last year, just like the year after, rather, they asked to identify two of the main sectors in the economy. And we spoke about those from before. All right, we spoke about those from before. All right. So now I guess I can jump to another paper, but we'll keep on going through various papers. And then the thing is, the papers, because the papers are you work on the papers from the syllabus perspective, you have an idea of what they will ask or what they can ask you, right? You have a pretty good idea of that from beforehand. So this is 2019, right? This is 2019's paper. And the first thing, as they typically do, they ask you to define or to list something, right? So they asked us to define the following terms, so economics. So I think this is a good definition. So economics is the study of how people allocate scarce resources for production, distribution, and consumption, both individually and also collectively. All right? And that's a good definition for economics. You have to remember to include the word scarce, and also including the word production, distribution, and consumption is also good to include it in that definition. Economy is very similar. So the economy encompasses all trade activities, all activities related to production, consumption, and trade of goods and services. So that is what an economy is. Right? So you have economics, which is a study, it's a social science, and you have economy, which is actual thing. Right? So the access to state two examples of an economic good, which is really just a normal good. However, I have a definition for economic good here. So an economic good will have some degree of scarcity in relation to demand, which we understand because it's finite in nature, right? And the scarcity is what creates its value. So for example, an economic good is like apples, or like, that is more common, but if you had something like diamonds, right, that would also be an economic good as well. So scarcity creates the value. People become willing to pay, for, in terms of the good. Right? So those are some good marks to secure. Not too difficult to secure. So part B asks us, the market for electricity rather, has a high cost, many buyers, and only one seller. Identify this type of market structure and compare it to monopoly. So as we figure from the characteristics which are there from the first sentence, part B is a monopoly, right? Generally high costs. You have many buyers, you only have one seller, right? And they generally have a unique product as well, right? So to compare this to the monopolistic competition, we understand that we can use a number of things. So we can, first characteristic of the market structures that we can look into is the number of sellers. So within a monopolistic competition is the keyword here. There are many sellers. Remember, for you to have a competition, you need multiple people. If it was only one person, it wouldn't be a competition, right? So the first thing is that you have a higher number of sellers in a monopolistic competition. In a monopoly, however, right? In a monopoly, however, you only have one seller, right? Secondly, in a monopolistic competition, the product is a differentiated product. So for example, the cell phone market is a monopolistic competition, right? In that you have different cell phones, but they all sorts of have can do similar things. It's just that, for example, if you have an iPhone or a Samsung or so, probably can take pictures a bit better, maybe a processor runs a bit faster, maybe a phone freezes a bit less. But on their basis, they're still phones, right? On their basis, they're still phones. So that is another thing that we have to consider. In a monopoly, however, there's a unique product. So that is the only supplier of the product, and that product is a unique product. It's not substitutable. It's the only product and of its kind on the market. Another thing that we can actually look into in terms of the market structure is the barriers to entry. The barriers to entry. Barriers to entry. So for a monopoly, the barriers to entry are extremely high. You cannot get into it. And this is part of the reason behind how the monopoly is able to retain its profits in the long run. The barriers to entry are high. That's why monopoly can retain its profit in the long run. Secondly, for the monopolistic competition, however, the barriers to entry are very, very low, right? The barriers to entry are very, very low. And thus, firms can enter and compete away profits in the long run because the barriers to entry are very, very low. Both firms, well, in terms of similarity, both firms are price makers, as you guys would know, because the only firm that is a price taker by economically speaking are firms which are under the perfect competition market structure. Let us press on. Cable Me and Cable U are two firms that dominate the cable market. Identify this type of market structure and compare it to perfect competition. So Cable Me and Cable U are two firms that dominate the cable market. Identify this type of market structure and compare it to perfect competition. So in this market, we have two firms that dominate, which implies that it is an oligopolistic market structure. A monopoly market structure, or a monopolist market structure. A monopolist market structure is when there's only one firm, right? Monopolist market structure is when there's only one firm, right? So, but this, it's an oligopoly. And in comparison to perfect competition, we have some differences. So in perfect competition, remember that everybody has the same product. In this market structure, that's not the case. The product is often differentiated, right? Additionally, in perfect competition, we know that there are many sellers. However, in the oligopolistic competition, we understand that there are only two sellers, right? Furthermore, in perfect competition, there have different degrees of price competition. The firms don't have any say over the price. They have to just accept the prevailing market price, right? That is the case in perfect competition. However, in this market structure, the oligopolistic market structure, and all the others, firms are price makers. So they make their own price. Another disparity between these two market structures is the barriers to entry. So for oligopolistic market structures, the barriers to entry are why it remains as two firms. In the perfectly competitive market structure, on the other hand, the barriers to entry are extremely low, which is why firms can enter and compete away the profits in the long run. Let us press on. So, part C says, Egbert is one of the few, Egbert. Egbert is one of the few specially trained dentists in the Caribbean. Each time Egbert has a new patient, he has to type all the himself, which often results in patients waiting for a long time to receive medical attention. To reduce his patient's wait time, Egbert could choose to hire a secretary, but this will involve a trade-off. Use relevant economic concepts to discuss Egbert's decision. Well, this question is relatively vague, honestly. However, I'm just going to I am going to rather reread it once more, and then we'll go into the answer that I came up with. Egbert, two specially trained dentists in the Caribbean. Each time Egbert has a new patient, he has to type all of the basic information himself, which often results in patients waiting for a long time to receive medical attention. To reduce his patient's wait time, Egbert could choose to hire a secretary, but this will involve a trade-off. Use relevant economic concepts to discuss Egbert's decision. So, what I came up with based on this question was that it was displayed the whole concept of the biggest concept in economics, which is scarcity or scarcity. So Egbert's time is scarce, right? Egbert's time rather is scarce. So instead of typing, he can delegate that task to someone else, or he can type himself. However, if he types himself, the patients have to wait a long time. So there's an opportunity cost there for typing. So when he types himself, it takes to get through to the patients, right? Or get to treat them. If he delegated the time, however, then he could have actually treated the patients, right? So we understand the concept of opportunity cost from this little scenario here that we have. So let us see number two, what number two is going on with. Right. So they first asked us to define the term production. So and there are several definitions that you can use for this and that you would attain full marks for. However, I think this definition that I got from your study guide, the CSEC definition, is pretty good or applicable. So production is a process in which various inputs, such as land, labor, and capital, are used to produce outputs in the form of goods and services. So that should more than attain the 2 marks, especially once you put keywords like input and output, and you can even throw in, as I have done there, because that is what they're looking for, which it's made clear, which becomes clearer when you look at the question after. So part 2 asked us to list the reward for each of the factors of production. Relatively straightforward question, easy 4 marks for you guys to attain. All right. So the first thing you have is land. I know the word for land is rent. We know the word for labor is wages or salary. The reward for capital is interest, and we know the reward for entrepreneurial talent is profits. And it's important for you guys to know these, you can swap them, understand them or swap them, but it will more than likely come back, and it's an easy 4 marks for you guys to attain. Very easy 4 marks for you guys to attain. Additionally, part B asks us to outline 2 advantages of labor efficiency for each of the following. So asks for a company. This is it. So for a company, when you have efficiency within the labor that you hire, it generally leads to lower costs because persons are working at a higher standard, at a higher rate, and overtime costs would fall as a result, right? Furthermore, it also leads to higher profits because when labor is efficient, right, cost of production often decreases or cost of production goes down. And if cost of production goes down, then profits are beneficial for our country, right, in two ways. So when labor is very efficient, again, cost of production generally goes down, so you can produce more. You can also produce more at more competitive rates, and thus you can have an increased GDP. Increased GDP often leads to also a better and a higher standard of living, or a standard of life, right? So yeah. Now they asked to, as a part of number 3, to define curve, right? And this definition here says demand curve is used to show the relationship between price and quantity demanded of a particular good or service. Input a particular good or service. A particular good or service. They asked us to list 4 factors shift in the demand curve. Now, there are many factors that may cause a shift in demand curve. And again, I don't know if you guys realize, but it's the same question, just in a different way, the same answers that we gave before. So we have taste, income, number of buyers, and what was the other one? And the price of other goods. And in terms of the Coke and the Pepsi system, buying bread, right? Well, in terms of if you have more, you demand more, right? And taste was serious situation or incident that we had, right? So yeah. Part B. Assume there's a 20% increase in the price of medicine and a 20% increase in the price of soda. Discuss whether the percentage change in quantity demand will be greater for medicine or soda. No, they both have a 20%. They both have a 20% increase, right? Sorry, but I guess they both have a 20% increase. However, they're not going to have the same effect on quantity demanded. The reason why the percentage change in quantity demanded will be greater for soda is because soda is more elastic relative to medicine. When people take medicine or medication, right, they have no other option. So it's not like, in general, it's not like, for example, if somebody, God forbid, has like cancer or something along that line, and they would need chemotherapy, they wouldn't have any other option, right? So if the price of chemotherapy went up, they would still have to, just have to meet the price. However, for soda, it's very substitutable, right? So it's very substitutable. So if the price of Coke, for example, goes up, Coca-Cola, people would just drink more Pepsi. If the price of bigger went up, people just get more Buster, right? So that is definitely the scenario. So medicine is inelastic, right? Whereas soda is elastic. So the percentage change in quantity demanded would be greater for soda, right? Give me 1 minute, guys, 1 minute. All right. So we understand that the percentage change in quantity demanded would probably be greater for soda. Now, the second thing that they asked us to do is to calculate the price elasticity of soda. So I'm going to open the document again and give me a minute. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was talking with the mic off. So a similar scenario to what we would have done before, wherein a percentage change in quantity demanded divided by a percentage change in price. They already informed us that our percentage change in price would be 20%. So we just calculated the percentage change in quantity demanded, and that is the new minus the old divided by the old times 100, right? And we get negative 150 over 300, which is negative 50%. We divide the negative 50% by 20%. Then we end up getting negative 2.5, right? So yeah, we end up getting negative 2.5. So let us press on and continue. So how would each of the following changes affect equilibrium price and quantity of cars? The price of public transportation decreases. So if the price of public transportation decreases, we will desire to take bus more, like take GTC bus, take other public transportation more, right? Thus, what we'd have to do, what would end up happening to cars is that they would have a fall in demand of cars. And if we have a fall in demand of cars, then the price will also decrease or fall, right? So that's what will happen. Now, this second scenario is a bit more complicated. The price of gasoline decreases, and at the same time, the number of companies selling cars also decreases. So the first thing I said was that there will probably be some type of shortage. So if the price of gasoline decreases, then persons would probably want to purchase more cars, right? Given that gasoline is elastic in reference to the car demand. So if the price of gasoline decreases, they would want to purchase more cars. However, if the number of companies selling cars decreases, then there's going to be a shortage, right? If there's a shortage, that means that if there's a shortage, rather, that means that we're operating below equilibrium price, right? We have a surplus to operate above. So we'll be operating below equilibrium price in that situation, in that scenario. Question 4 asks us to define each of the following terms, and that includes corporate bond, right? And again, these are definitions that are in the text. However, I have some of them here. Very simple, 2 marks, should be 2 sentences. So these are the companies' ways these are issued by companies, rather. Not issues, issued by companies as a way of raising money to invest in their business, and they're often traded on the stock exchange. That is a corporate bond. You also have government which is the way that governments, seek to increase, their own funding. Now this is a treasury bond, and these are the debt securities issued by the government. And essentially, basically, you're just like the corporate bond, you're loaning money to the government by purchasing a bond. They also asked us to state 2 qualities of money, right? And we know that there's so many qualities. We have scarcity, acceptability, portability, durability. And you also have a few more, right? You have a few more qualities of money as well, but they only asked to state 2 of them. So this is a discussion question about the informal sector of a country's contributions. So this is quite long with regard to economic buffering, right? But let me just, so you guys can see, it's quite a bit. So the informal sector of a country plays a crucial role in providing economic buffering. This refers to the ability to absorb shocks and fluctuations in the formal economy. And then there are some ways that the informal sector contributes to economic buffering. So the first thing is that the informal sector is often a significant source of unemployment. When we're talking about, by the way, when we're speaking about economic buffering, we mean like, a buffer means that you make something more solid or more resistant to shocks, right? So for example, if demand goes down randomly one day, if the informal sector buffers, if you have a good informal sector, then the country probably wouldn't just jump into recession like that. So the informal sector can play that buffering role, that sort of insurance issue. Now back to it. So employment generation, the informal sector is often a significant source of employment, especially for individuals with limited skills or education, which is very true. It offers opportunities for self-employment and income generation, thereby reducing unemployment rates and providing safety net during economic downturns. In times of recession or job losses in the formal sector, people can turn to the informal sector for livelihoods, ensuring a degree of economic stability. That is one example. Another example is income diversification. So individuals engage in informal activities alongside their formal jobs as a fallback option, right? So for example, like say you're farming on the side, but you're a teacher, right? So that you have a shop on the side, but you are an engineer, right? So this diversification of income sources helps to mitigate risks associated with relying solely on formal employment, because what if you get fired one day? Right? So those are two examples. I think that you really would only need 2 at most, and you just write for your 2 points. Furthermore, the informal sector also assists with cost savings, right? Now, for one, the informal sector typically has lower transaction costs, right? So they typically involve fewer intermediaries, which means that you're not going through bank and this and that and stuff like that, and everybody adding interest or taking this little extra money. For example, if you use Link, you lose a little bit of extra money. You lose a little bit of extra money, right? But if you use a surgical ATM, maybe you lose a little bit of extra money. NCB ATM, you use a little bit of extra money. In the informal sector, you don't lose this because things are mostly cash to cash or hand to hand, right? So that's another example of where the informal sector is a really, really good thing. It's a great thing. Let us Maggie and 6 of her parents are dissatisfied with their local community bank. They decided to try another method of saving. Maggie was appointed community leader and receives cash deposits from her 6 friends on a weekly basis. Every week, Maggie gives a different person a cash lump sum equal to the total amount she collects from everyone. Part 1 asks, state 2 days by which this informal method of saving is called. So let me reread the paragraph. Maggie and 6 of her friends are dissatisfied with their local community bank. They decided to try another method of saving. Maggie was appointed community leader and receives cash deposits from her 6 friends on a weekly basis. All right, so she receives cash from 6 friends. Every week, she gives a different person the cash lump sum equal to the amount she collects from everyone. State 2 names by which this informal method of saving is called. And this is called in Jamaica partner, and in some other Caribbean islands, it's called susu. I don't know if I pronounce susu correctly, but I think that's how it's pronounced. Now, they also asked us to discuss the role of one of the informal methods of stated in C1. So the role of a partner such is really to get quick fire loans. So you need money and you need money now. However, if you were saving by yourself, maybe you wouldn't have gotten the money. Or not maybe it's no, not that you wouldn't have gotten the money, but probably would have gotten maybe 3 months down the line. However, if you're the first person to draw in the partner, then you get the money instantly. So think about getting the money in September rather than getting it in December, right? So these are 2 very, very important things to look at and to consider. Let us press on and continue, right? So question 5 asks us to define the following terms. These questions always start with define the following terms. So first term of is trade liberalization. And that's the process of opening up trade between nations by the removal of restrictions. Preferential tariff is kind of like the opposite. So this occurs when a government imposes lower tariffs on some imports and higher tariffs on others. The lower tariffs would be the preferential tariffs. So for example, let's say that Jamaica wants to export bananas to America, but we cannot compete with other banana producers in the world. If America wants to help out Jamaica, then what they could do is put a preferential tariff on Jamaica and put higher tariffs on the other persons in the world. This would make the Jamaican product more competitive on the market because it would be less pricey. And as we know from the law of demand, when price is lower, quantity demanded is higher. Part 2 asks us to state the meaning of each of the following acronyms, which this often is the case. They ask us to state the meaning of some acronyms. FTAA. So that is Free Trade Area of the Americas, rather. And CDB stands for Caribbean Development Bank. These are 2 marks that we should always, try to get, because these are 2 marks that we should always try to get, because they typically ask, based on what I've seen, they typically ask you guys to they ask you guys to restate an acronym rather. Now, they asked us to discuss two benefits of the CARICOM single market and economy to Caribbean territories. This is kind of like a Cape Carib Studies question, but there are a number of benefits. So the first thing we can talk about is increased economic efficiency. So because the borders will be open, there will be increased competition, and competition drives efficiency. And not only that, but competition also results in lower prices. There's also increased integration, which is very essential if the Caribbean wants to have, a degree of power, in terms of trading with the other world, because by themselves, the islands don't take up much GDP, really and truly, right? And have a lot of products. However, together, it says unity is strength. Together, they carry much more weight. Furthermore, there's also the free movement of goods and services, which is also one of the things that are beneficial when you have a free market. And a free market is one of the aspects or one of the steps to creating a single market. Now we are on to another sheet. As I said, we're going through many sheets. We're going through many sheets. Well, not many sheets. We'll be finished soon, but I don't want to take too much time for my guys to study. Right? So maybe we'll have about one or two. I think we'll probably this not the last paper. I think the next paper we'll go through will be the final one, and then we'll be able to call it a day. No, we're going to be doing aspects of the 2018 paper. And here beginning. So this time they ask us, again, they always ask us to list something. We've gotten used to that by now. They always ask us to list or to define something, right? Now they asked us to list the 3 types of economies. And we know that the 3 types of economies are the free market economy, the planned economy, and the mixed economy. And Jamaica is a heavily mixed economy. Best examples of free market would be like America. And for commodity economy, that would be more like along like China, right? Or Cuba. Cuba would be a better example. They also asked us to define the term opportunity. They also asked us to define the term opportunity cost, right? And we know, as we said prior, opportunity cost. And again, as you guys realize that this is the same questions that keep coming back again and again and again. We understand that opportunity cost is the next best alternative foregone when an economic decision is made. That is what opportunity cost is, right? Part C says, with the aid of a diagram, explain the difference between efficient points and attainable points with respect to a production possibility curve. No, I mean it's right here, really and truly. So when we're on the line, we know that when we're on the line, we are efficient, right? When we're on the line, we're efficient, right? When we're below the line, we understand that we are inefficient. When we are above the line, we know that it is unattainable given the current resources in the economy. So, and this is what PPF typically looks. But what is attainable what is attainable is, well, this and this. This is attainable and this is attainable. However, only this is efficient. So to be attainable, it can be below the line and on the line. However, to be efficient, you need to be on the line. So for country A, this following question, we got a table and they asked us to calculate the opportunity costs. So it changes each and every time. So what we would have to do is we'll have to calculate, just like this example here, we have to calculate each situation, each scenario. So the movement from this to the other one. So the movement from 0 to 1, move from 1 to 2. And as you realize, it's changing each time and it's actually decreasing each time. So at first it's 10, then it's 8, then it's 6, then it becomes 5. So in this case, we'll have a decreasing opportunity cost. And this is how the PPF would actually look. Typically, it's an increasing opportunity cost, like here, right? But in this scenario, because as you produce more capital goods, consumption goods, as you produce more capital goods, right? You have to give up less and less consumption goods. Typically, when you produce more of this one good, you have to give up more of this good as you produce more. However, in this case, as you produce more of this, you actually give up less of that. Right? So let me reiterate that. So typically, to produce more of this good over here, you'd have to give up more and more of this good to produce more and more of this. However, in this case, you're giving up less and less each time to produce more and more of this. So in this case, you have decreasing opportunity costs. Typically, you have increasing opportunity costs, however, this time you have decreasing opportunity costs. Number 2 asks us, most Caribbean territories have a water company, which is a monopoly, responsible for the distribution of water to the various households. Distribution of water is done through a network of pipes and mains that runs schematically through the various districts and the parishes. Part A says, list 3 characteristics of a monopoly market structure. Now, there are many, and again, as you guys had probably realized, this is a similar question to the one that we did a while ago. So they're asking you guys the same things, just in different ways. So even without clicking on the yellow comment button, we remember that monopolies have a unique product. They are the only firm in the industry, and they also have very, very high barriers to entry. So we know these things from before, right? Yeah. Secondly, they asked us to state the factor of production which each of the following is classified. It's a bit different from the questions that we have seen before. However, we know that water is an example of land in terms of factor of production, and network of pipes is an example of capital, right? So if you buy a plot of land and it has a stream on it, that stream would be included in your land where you have. For the network of pipes now, that refers to machinery that you use to make the production process more efficient. All right. So let us press on and continue. Describe 2 ways in which a monopoly market structure differs from a monopolistically competitive market structure. Guys, as you realize, this is the same question. It is the same question that we did a while ago, in which it's literally the same question that we did a while ago. So for a monopoly, but we will reiterate, because by repeating stuff, that is how it gets stuck in the mind. So we know a monopoly is the only seller in the market, whereas in a monopolistically competitive structure, there are many sellers in the market. We also know that in a monopoly, there's a unique product, whereas in a monopolistically competitive market, there is differentiated products, right? Furthermore, we understand that we understand that inside the monopoly as well, there are high barriers to entry. However, in the monopolistically competitive market structure, the barriers to entry are extremely low, which is why the monopolistically competitive firms cannot maintain profits in the long run, whereas the monopoly can maintain profits in the long run. Now, Part D asks us, explain how the existence of a water company as a monopoly for distribution of water can cause market failure. So basically, this question is asking us how do monopolies cause market failure? And we know that monopolies cause market failure because they use their command over the market, because they're the only firm, to restrict quantity and increase price. Thus, certain individuals will be willing and able to purchase water or pay for water at the perfectly competitive price are not able to anymore, right? So some aspect of the consumer surplus will be eroded by the monopoly, and the monopoly will take some of the consumer surplus from the people. Number 3 asks us to define each of the following terms. So we know that factors of production these are basically, if you define this, the main types of economic resources that are combined to produce goods and services. You could also list them as well in an additional sentence because it's 2 marks, so I typically think you should give them 2 sentences. I know those are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, right? So, furthermore, the second part asks to define the long run. So the long run is a period of time by which all factors can be varied. In the short run, we understand that there's at least one fixed factor. And in the short run, that fixed factor tends to be capital, right? However, in the long run, there's ample time or enough time to vary. Part B asks us to identify one type of business organization. And there are a number of organizations. I mean, I wrote sole trader here, but you could use a partnership or company, or you could use any other type, truly. You just want to identify one, write it in a sentence, and you get your mark. Part C asks us to explain 2 internal benefits that a firm receives from expanding production in the long run. So, this question is testing your knowledge of economies of scale. So I wrote a few economies of scale here. I wrote technical and marketing and financial. So technical economies of scale have to do with machinery and how, as the firm grows and earns more revenue, you are more able to invest in great machinery and replace workers to an extent. But you can invest rather in machinery that results in better products and resources, and products and resources being produced much more quickly and much more efficiently. You also have marketing economies, which sometimes they include things like you can purchase things in bulk, because as you guys know, if you purchase something in bulk, it's a lot cheaper than if you purchase it by itself. So when you can purchase a lot of things in bulk, you get things overall a lot cheaper than purchasing a small amount. So, and larger companies tend to purchase more in bulk relative to smaller entities, right? With regard to financial economies, now, when firms become larger, they generally are viewed as more profitable or more trustworthy, right? And they also trust the firms, given that they probably have more collateral to put up on said loans. So when firms expand in production, they are also able to get more favorable credit rates from like banks and so forth. Part D asks, explain how division of labor can be applied to a large bakery. So I wrote some examples here, but this is a creative question. Honestly, it's really for you guys to just look and to, see what you would think. So I wrote that you may have individuals responsible for getting ingredients, individuals responsible for mixing ingredients, individuals responsible for the actual baking, to preheat the oven and to time the oven and stuff like that. And you could also have persons responsible for like packaging. So you can have have the division of labor and have different persons doing different things, different persons specializing in different areas. Question 4 asks us to define the term fiscal policy. Now, fiscal policy is the control of the relationship between the level of taxes and government spending in order to stabilize the economy. So we know that fiscal is taxes and government spending, monetary is interest rate and money supply. Let me repeat that. Fiscal is government taxes and government spending and taxes, monetary is interest rate and money supply. Part B says list 3 types of unemployment. And there are many types. So I have seasonal, structural, real wage, cyclical, and I think frictional. So any of those 3 types work. Right? Any of those 3 types honestly works. We're asked to explain 2 types of inflation. And we know you have cost push and demand pull. Cost push, the inflation occurs because the cost of raw materials and so forth goes up. So the cost of production goes up and those same costs are passed on to consumers through prices. For demand pull occurs when the rising demand increases the cost of goods. And we know that when demand goes up, price also goes up. So, yeah, when demand goes up, price also goes up. Determine the component of GDP that is affected by each of the following activities. So, the aunt buys a house. This is a form of investment, quote unquote, right? And this will cause GDP to go up. Family buys a new car. This component is consumption, right? Farmer Joe grows tomatoes for his family. This actually does not enter GDP calculation altogether, unless he goes and like sells them to somebody else. Domestically made sugar is sold to a bakery in a foreign country. This increases GDP because this is an example of net exports going up because exports would be increasing, right? Question 5 asks us to state the meaning of each of the following abbreviations, right? And the following abbreviations: CET, which means common external tariff, right? That is CET. And for WTO, I think that one is very, very, very popular. WTO is World Trade Organization. So WTO is quite popular, right? But again, just like before, I'm going to ask you guys some acronyms. I'm going to ask you guys some acronyms. You prepared for some acronyms. So earlier we saw CDB, CET, WTO, right? The furthermore, they asked us to identify one non-tariff barrier to trade, and that is, you can use quota. Quota is an example of that, right? They asked us to define again the balance of trade, and we know that this is the difference between a country's visible and invisible balances. So that's countries' exports and imports. So exports minus imports. For currency appreciation, we know that this is in a floating exchange rate system because appreciation and depreciation for floating. Devaluation and revaluation is for fixed. So when a country appreciates, is when a country's currency becomes more valuable rather, relative to some external currency. Right? Part D asks us to discuss two policies that can be implemented to reduce a balance of payments deficit. And that is, I have many policies I can use. So I have a few here. So I have restricting imports. So how would you restrict imports and how would that help? Well, if you restrict imports, then your home currency will not flow out. And when your currency flows out, that's a negative in the BOP, right? So in this way, you probably you would limit the negativity of your BOP. So you restrict imports and you will retain more of the currency. If you encourage exports, you will get inflow of foreign currency into your home currency, which positively impacts the balance of payments. Restricting import does not negatively impact the balance of payments. Encouraging exports positively impacts the balance of payments. Encouraging capital inflows as well would also positively impact the balance of payments, and allowing currency value to fall would also positively impact the balance of payments. Because when currency value falls, exports become cheaper and imports become more expensive. And that inadvertently would restrict imports and encourage exports. Now we have a little table here. And the access calculate the current account balance, which we know that would be 10 million exports minus imports. Calculating the capital account balance is -8 because it's outflows minus inflows. Just like this, export minus import, because exports minus imports, because exports would represent currency coming in, imports would represent currency leaving, right? So we tabulate that and we not tabulate that, but we understand that we have a surplus balance because we have 10 here in terms of the money that we're getting from our exports minus or from our net exports rather. And in terms of capital flows, right, more money is actually investment abroad. More money is actually flowing out than flowing in, right? However, because the excess is a lot greater, is greater than this, we still have a surplus. The access to define some of the following terms, and this is the last question that we'll go through. And the access to define economic integration. And again, there are many complicated definitions. However, it's 2 marks and it's at CSEC level, so I don't think there's a need to get into very, very complicated definitions. But economic integration refers to the collaboration of 2 or more countries to limit trade restrictions and encourage political and economic cooperation. So you're saying you want the barriers to trade to fall, right? You want barriers to trade to go down. You want trade liberalization, and you want to encourage persons to cooperate economically and politically. A multilateral agreement is a trade agreement between 3 or more countries with the intention of basically trade liberalization. So a multilateral agreement is a trade agreement established between 3 or more countries with the intention of reducing barriers to trade, which is a form of trade liberalization, and reducing things like tariffs and stuff along that line, right? So want to liberalize trade. They also asked us to list 3 examples of economic integration, right? And 3 examples of economic integration are free trade area, customs union, common market, and you can even use economic union as well. They asked us also to outline 4 benefits of globalization to firms. So first things first, we'll have globalization results in the access to new markets, right? Because there's a global market. There's also product development and new revenue streams, and new revenue streams come from the access to new markets. There's also the sharing of knowledge, technology, and culture, because some countries specialize and are better at some things than other countries, especially technology. So, for example, globalization is a reason why Singapore's microchips can be exported to various places, right? And how Hong Kong's microchips that can be exported to various places. Part 4, it's easier to develop universal standards, which are good in terms of for consumers, you know, because if you get this food from America or you get this food from Australia, you know this is good food, right? And furthermore, you also have access to a diverse talent pool, because you have access to more persons across the world. You have persons which are, you know, can bring various things to the table in terms of functioning at a company. And finally, and this is the last question that we'll go through for this marathon. It says small size is a barrier to trade at an international level, because also regional integration can overcome this problem. So regional integration allows market expansion. And as you know, in the Caribbean countries, for example, the initial markets are very small. Jamaica is very small, Barbados is very small, Trinidad is very small. You know, and these other countries are very small. Think about the ABC Islands, Antigua, stuff like that. Those are very small countries. So when we integrate, there's a market expansion within our own within the borders of the Caribbean. There's also economies of scale, which occur when, you know, what economies of scale are, the cost advantages that you accrue when firms increase in size. Because there's access to larger markets, firms are incentivized to increase their size, right? And those increase their size, they experience economies of scale. They also have enhanced bargaining power in terms of when they're discussing things with other nations in the world, for example, the European Union, they have a lot more say and bargaining power together as a unit rather than being one individual island, like a one Jamaica, one Barbados, one Aruba, one Bonaire, one Curacao. When they're together, there's strength in unity, right? So when they're together, they're more united. And they have more of a say-so, right? Because they contribute more to the global GDP rather than just being by themselves. And finally, there's also a diversification of markets in that they have access to various other markets, and not only the markets in the region, but they have access to more markets overall, which are worldwide. And yeah, that's. So thank you guys so much for coming out. I know that you will all do quite well on your exam. You know, study. You know, you have your textbooks, and everything is really in your textbooks at this point. So, you know, and take care, guys.